The Autoline Supplier Symposium is brought to you by our signature sponsor, Ford, Go Further, and also by Pure Michigan, dedicated to maintaining Michigan's position as the epicenter of the global automotive industry, Continental, the future in motion, and by Borg Warner, feel good about driving.
Welcome to the Autoline Supplier Symposium, coming to you from the floor of the North American International Auto Show in Detroit. In fact, specifically, we're at the Ford display, and we really want to thank Ford for having put us in such a primo position. We've got a number of panels coming up today talking about a variety of things in the supplier industry. Specifically, we're going to be looking at free trade agreements. We're going to be looking at connected vehicles and where all that's going, and then we'll be looking at the cars themselves and where the technology in them is going to take us in the future. But to kick off our first discussion, joining me right now is Carla Preston. She's the Director for Supplier Diversity Development at the Ford Motor Company. Carla, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, John, and welcome to the Auto Show.
It's great to be here. There's a great vibe on the floor right now. There really is.
It is a palpable energy. It's really tangible. It's amazing. I love it.
Let's talk about supplier diversity development. First, let's get a definition for anybody that may not be exactly aware of what that's all about.
Well, at Ford Motor Company, we define supplier diversity as those who are minority, which there are 4 categorizations as defined by the U.S. government: African American, Asian American, Native American, and Hispanic American. We also define it as women and also veteran, and that includes service disabled. So we're very proud of that. For 38 years, we have supported diverse development, not only within our supply chain at a tier 1 level, but really driving it down. And that's really helped to create jobs, it's really helped to drive the economy, and really helped to the communities in which we live and work in better places to be because of the work that's being done there.
I don't think a lot of people are aware of that, is that the U.S. government's actually got a goal of promoting all this.
The U.S. government, for companies that are doing it, and especially those who supply to the U.S. government like Ford, they do ask us to look at our supply base and make sure that we are balanced in terms of, and for us, it's really the right thing to do because we want to have suppliers in our network that represent our employees and our consumers. We support, we're a global company with a global supply base, and we're very proud of that fact.
And you're not newbies to this. You've been doing it for quite a while.
Yes, since 1978, when Henry Ford II actually kicked off the program. So to have a member of the Ford family to feel very passionate about it and saying that Ford has an obligation and a social responsibility, but more importantly, a business case, that we believe that if you're going to be a supplier in our base, you have to meet all the requirements, whether you're diverse or not. And that's very important for us because you don't get chosen because you're a diverse supplier. You get chosen because you are the best supplier and you happen to be a diverse supplier of ours.
But as you know, it's tough for minority-owned suppliers. In a world where you want to be global, have massive capitalization, meaning a lot of money in there, many of the minority-owned suppliers tend to be much smaller, not quite so global. It's got to be tough for them to try to really get on the list to supply Ford.
Well, John, that is true, but the way Ford has done it is we have worked, again, for 38 years, and we've taken suppliers and we've grown them, because it's not just the number of suppliers it's had, it's how you've grown them over their time with us. In fact, we have over 30 suppliers that have over 20 consecutive years of doing business with us who are minority, women, and veteran. We've taken suppliers such as Vinnie Johnson in the Piston Group, Andra Rush in the Rush Group, Frank Venegas, Jerry Diaz in the Diaz Group, and they've grown with us. As we've grown and we've gone to a global footprint, they've also supported us, both on the production side, those are the direct products and services that help to make our vehicles, but on our indirect, those are the things that support us, such as marketing, communications, healthcare, tooling, things that we need in our plants, anything from the toilet paper to getting our commercials out. And we have great partners such as Zuby, a Hispanic supplier in Miami, and Uniworld, an African American supplier that works with Team Detroit, our general marketing. So again, it's about understanding the needs that we have, finding the right supplier and bringing them in. And yes, there is, when you come in Ford, an expectation that you will meet the same requirements that everyone has, because that's what we expect of everyone. But we will also work with you and help you to grow. And we're very proud of the fact that in 2014, we have over 33 suppliers that supported us globally. So these are US-based companies who are minority, women, and veterans who are supporting us in China, supporting us in Europe, supporting us in South America, supporting us in ways that really help to drive our company to meet our One Ford objectives, to have vehicles that people are passionate about and love.
I know too that Ford's been a conduit to connect minority suppliers with some of its other tier 1 suppliers?
Absolutely. We feel very important that making sure suppliers are successful. And sometimes the diverse suppliers don't have the scale, or they don't have the scope, or they're not ready to supply directly to Ford. So we encourage our tier 1 suppliers, those who support Ford directly, to work with diverse suppliers. We ask them to spend 6% annually with minorities, 2% with women, and 3% with veteran. And that's diversifying the supply chain, but it's also making sure that suppliers are successful and they come in at the right place and then they grow. And we've actually taken several suppliers that were tier 2 that we moved up to tier 1, and that's what the beauty of it is.
You just said something interesting, including veterans now.
Including veterans, and we're very proud to be supporting our veterans because they have shown tremendous service to our country. Ford has been a long-time advocate of veterans since really back to when Henry Ford first started working with the DAV, the Disabled Veterans Group, that we have supported veteran and veteran initiatives, but our goal has been to say, let's take veteran suppliers as they come and they transition their lives and helping them to be entrepreneurs and helping them to support us. And we're very proud of suppliers like Leon Richardson of Chemical Maze that does some great work for us on our indirect side, or Austin and Gus Ramirez of Husco Automotive, people that, or Jimmy Comer of IMA, those are the supporting us, and we're giving back and supporting veterans, and they are hiring veterans, and it's so exciting.
Carla, we're seeing a big change right now in the automotive industry. Technology's playing a bigger and bigger role. You know, whether we're talking connected cars or vehicle-to-vehicle communication, maybe ultimately autonomous cars here. Does that help with minority suppliers? Because a lot of this stuff, even whether it's just apps that you're developing for in-car communication, you don't need a massive capital investment. Right. You don't need factories and machine tools. Is this going to help?
This is going to be another evolutionary step, I believe, for diverse suppliers. First of all, you wanted to get diverse suppliers, and a lot of times we started with getting people into kitting and sequencing, just putting things together. Then we moved them to then making actual products. Now it's saying, but that required a lot of capital. It's very, cap intensive. So it's saying, all right, looking at the new entrepreneur, the millennials who are starting businesses when they're 16 and 17, they can do that from the house and do apps and software. So that's one of our initiatives. As Ford is looking at those services, how are we going to then approach our diverse supplier strategy? And that's one of our key things. And we're working through that for our Joint Technology Framework. And Joint Technology Framework is a program that's exclusive to Ford and to its diverse suppliers, that we open our patent, our processes, and our people to provide innovation and technology to diverse suppliers so that they can help Ford and help themselves to really diversify their business.
That's opening the door a lot, especially when you say patents. I know the Ford Motor Company's got a lot of intellectual property. Why is it so willing to just open it up and share that?
We have thousands. We have brilliant engineers, and they file for thousands of patents a year, and we have thousands in our library that we can't use. But we again feel that our suppliers are part of our family. And so to help the diverse suppliers who may not have research and engineering centers that some of our non-diverse suppliers do have, or having that technical capability to do that, we will work with them to help them to build that foundation and to grow. And this is one way to do it. And we feel very strongly about sharing because they're part, again, about helping the Ford to be successful. We want them to be successful.
Okay, you've opened these doors to have them come inside Ford and see what they can use. Are they taking advantage of it?
Yes, we actually have 28 projects that were identified. We're currently being reviewed by both our purchasing and our product development and manufacturing teams. And it's a very detailed process that we use our match pair process, which is manufacturing, PD, and purchasing, that we sit and we meet on a regular basis to review not just this particular project, but how we're doing business and what things we're going to be doing in the future and how we're designing vehicles. And the Joint Technology Framework is a part of that to say, if we're going to do a project that's going to require a patent, you're going to need not just purchasing, but product development. And the two have to work together. And these projects get elevated all the way up to our most senior level of the company to say, do we approve of this project? Are we going to have the business case? Do we have the business case for it? And will Ford itself be able to support? And then that's how we've made the program, we believe, a success and a differentiator.
Okay, you've got some minority suppliers you've been doing business with for 20 years plus. You're helping them move up the value chain from tier 2 to tier 1. You're opening up your patents to it. How is it? What's the progress report? How is the industry or even the Ford Motor Company doing in getting more minority suppliers?
Well, first of all, we are so proud to be part of an initiative that's really a joint initiative in automotive. Automotive is considered one of the strongest areas in the country for supplier diversity. It actually started in automotive, and we're very proud of that fact. Since 1978, Ford has sourced over $80 billion we've spent with diverse suppliers, and that's B with $1 billion. That is a lot of money that we're spending. And it's growing our communities. So we feel that's an indicator, but more importantly, looking at suppliers that are able to support us globally, looking at suppliers that are creating jobs, looking at suppliers that bring us new innovations that we've then put in our vehicles. Having suppliers come to us and say, hey, I think I can support your China facilities because I'm going to open a facility in South Korea like Preston did, and they are now supporting us in our Chinese facilities with their product, and it's awesome because we've helped them to expand outside of the United States, or companies like Iwi that have been a global supplier of us for many years and support us throughout North America, but in every market that we have, and helping us with our cutting tools. So things that we are very important to making, again, a vehicle is what we have said to our suppliers. You come to us with an idea and a business case, and we'll help you.
That's terrific news, and it's great to hear, and it's impressive to see that Ford's been at it so long, 38 years. So it's not a flash in the pan thing. It isn't some sort of window dressing. You're serious about it.
This is a corporate commitment from the very top, from Bill Ford all the way down to Mark Fields, throughout the organization, that we feel passionate about this. This is how we do business. Again, suppliers are an integral part of making sure that we have vehicles on the road, vehicles that people are passionate about. And to have those vehicles, we need to have suppliers who are diverse and suppliers who are non-diverse. And of those diverse suppliers, we need them to be competitive and innovative and fresh. And that's what we're working on with them, to say we're taking you away from doing the kitting and the sequencing, and we're moving you to actually building products and services. But as Mark Fields said earlier this week, it's also about expanding ourselves into services. And that's where the apps and the licensing and the software has opened a whole new frontier for us to investigate. And yes, there's work to be done, but we're up for the challenge, and we believe our diverse suppliers are as well.
Well, look, it's we're shining a spotlight on Ford's effort right now, but it's so cool to hear you say that the auto industry is really a leader in this regard.
Mm-hmm. In fact, so much that the national conference for the National Minority Supply Development Council is coming to Michigan in 2017. Over 6,000 people are expected to be in Detroit. And then in June of 2018, the Women's National Council is coming. And that is exciting news for Michigan, for Detroit, and for the automotive industry and our suppliers.
That's terrific. Carla, Preston, thanks so much for stopping by and bringing us. Here, I'm going to give you an elbow bump.
That's right.
So I don't share my cold with anybody here, but thanks so much for coming by. Don't go away, folks. We've got 3 more panels coming up where we're going to get into some really good things of what's impacting the supplier industry. We'll be back right after this.
Okay, so the government crash tested the F-150, the one with the high-strength military-grade aluminum alloy body, bolted to a high-strength steel frame, and guess what? It made the strongest statement any truck can make. It pulled a 5-star safety rating on all sides for every cab configuration. Because when they say military grade, they mean battle tested. This is the Ford F-150, and every other truck is history.
I'm joined right now by Kevin Kerrigan. He is the Senior Vice President for the Automotive Office of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, and he's a Senior Advisor for Automotive Initiatives to the state of Michigan. Kevin, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Nice to see you, John.
Very interesting. Michigan, of course, is probably the most automotive state of any of the 50 states, and one of the greatest concentrations of automotive anything in the world. Why do they need somebody like you to go out and start promoting what's going on in the state?
Well, we have a team of business development people at the state who deal with companies in the state, looking after their needs in terms of retention, if they're expanding or they're looking for people. We also have a group that looks at international foreign direct investment. Those individuals are generalists. They work in many different areas of business development, but what the automotive office brings is specialty in automotive. We're sort of the SMEs for the automotive industry, and we help those business development managers when they call on a customer or they need to know something about what's going on in a specific area of the automotive industry.
You're doing a great job, really, of getting the word out that Michigan has a lot of high tech going on. It's not just metal banging anymore. Tell us a little bit, or bring us up to date on your efforts in autonomous vehicles, for example.
Well, I think you're right. The auto industry has reached a point of inflection. It's changed dramatically and is continued to change over the next 10 or 15 years. And so there are many technologies that are coming into play, especially in the automated, connected and autonomous area. So we are working with companies and we're helping to promote that activity within the state. One of the most important aspects of that is the talent that we need in new areas. A lot of these technologies are new to Michigan, they're new to the world. So we're looking for new software development engineers and software designers that haven't traditionally been part of the automotive industry.
How are you reaching out to them, especially if they're in, you know, the more tech areas? How do you get them to come to automotive?
So we work with the universities in the state and the community colleges. We have an outreach to all of those different groups. We also have a new campaign which is called We Run on Brainpower, and that campaign is directed specifically at the high-tech aspect of the automotive industry to attract people to Michigan and also to retain the talent that we have here.
Another hot topic that ties right into that, of course, is cybersecurity. I know that's another focus of yours.
Yeah, cybersecurity is one of those topics which is probably, it's a very large topic for the nation in many, many ways. It's a very serious issue. It's coming up in the automotive industry on a daily basis now. One of the reasons is that with all the new technology, with all the new software, the only real way to keep that current in a vehicle is over-the-air updates. As soon as you open that can of having over-the-air updates, the security issues and the cybersecurity issues grow exponentially. So we're focusing very hard on that. The number one issue for cybersecurity is safety. And then second to that, there is the issue of personal property, whether that be your own identity or if it's just someone stealing from your bank account or stealing from your car. In the old days, it used to be someone would use a brick. Now they can do it from remotely and take your personal property. So these are big issues that the auto industry has to confront.
Well, it does have to confront them, and it's very much an interesting time of fast technological change. The pace is something I've never seen before. Kudos to the MEDC and your efforts to try and attract more talent to doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time today, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
Welcome back to the Autoline Supplier Symposium, coming to you from the North American International Auto Show. We're getting into our first panel discussion right now, which is all about free trade. You've probably heard of the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Have you heard of TTIP? We're going to be getting into that in just a minute. You'll learn what that's all about if you don't know. But let me introduce you to my panel. We've got right now Frank Ervin III, the Senior Director for Government Affairs at Magna. Allan Stevenson is the Global Customs and Export Counsel with Delphi. And Paul Griffiths is the Deputy Director for the United Kingdom's Department for Business. I want to thank all three of you for joining us here today.
Thanks for having us.
Paul, why don't we start with you? I teased that out there. TTIP, explain to the audience what that is and what it's all about.
TTIP is a free trade agreement currently being negotiated between the US and the European Union. I know a lot of people will have heard of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but what they should know is that TTIP has a potential to be even bigger. The EU and the US already have a huge trading relationship. There's over $2 billion worth of goods and services traded every day. The US has hundreds of billions of dollars invested in Europe, but there's potential to do a lot more. There are remaining tariff barriers that we want to get rid of, and there's also regulatory barriers that we really think we can address.
And specifically automotive, how might this free trade agreement between the US and the EU help the automotive industry?
Well, the automotive industry should be one of the biggest beneficiaries. We've been looking at this, and we've realized that there's tariff barriers that for the EU, that they impose a 10% barrier on US car imports, and that means that US businesses are paying $700 million a year to the European Union. More importantly than that, there are regulatory barriers that are estimated to be worth up to 26% of the cost of a car. So that means that whilst American automotive businesses are selling millions of cars into Europe already, far more than to Japan or to some other countries, there's a potential to do a lot more.
Very interesting. Okay, let's go to the other ocean over there, the Pacific side of things. And Frank, let's start with you. The OEMs don't, i.e. the car companies, for example, Ford Motor Company's been very vocal. It does not really like the Trans-Pacific or partnership. What about from the supplier side of things? I'm guessing you got a different point of view.
Well, no, I don't think it's a totally different point of view. I think we all understand that there is a necessity for free trade. This agreement, is not everything that we wanted. It's not entirely the way we wanted it, but at the end of the day, some trade or some type of agreement that gets implemented that stops, the trade barriers and all of the duties on vehicles at some point is necessary for the United States to keep growing its manufacturing base. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at, how do we get and stay competitive, especially on the supplier part side, and stay competitive and be able to make those parts here in the United States and move them freely throughout the world. That's the big thing for us.
And Allan, how do you see it?
Well, we're still studying it ourselves too, but it does some traditional good things which free trade agreements do. It lowers and eliminates duties. It has trade facilitation to make it easier to import your goods, and it has transparency of the rules and regulations so we know what they are and we have influence over them. So those are all good, helpful things.
Automakers, of course, are afraid that they're going to face more competition here, but I got to believe that a free trade agreement like this, the TPP, would give suppliers more flexibility.
Well, it does give some more flexibility, but in the case of the TPP, there's 12 countries involved. Most free trade agreements have 2 or 3 in the case of NAFTA, so it's really hard to know at this point, I think, all of the economic effects of it. It depends on what your trade flows are and your manufacturing footprint. It could advantage certain flows, and it could be a hindrance to others. It kind of depends, and those are things we're still looking at.
I think it's very tough to, at this point, say exactly how anybody or what side anybody can come down on, because this agreement is so big and so extensive that the study part of it is still continuing, and the effects of what it would be is still continuing, not only at the company side, at the manufacturer or the OEM side, but also in the government side. We don't know where the government's going to be on this, and I think we all have to wait to find out, what the studies say, can affect and not affect the whole thing, and then we can make some decisions. But until then, I don't think anybody can make a real decision.
Can I add in? Unlike TPP, TTIP hasn't been negotiated completely yet, so it's still underway. And actually, there's a really big opportunity now for automotive businesses to feed in on their priorities, because we think that by getting into the detail of the regulatory barriers, we can really cut down on costs.
How about with safety and emissions regulations? Would it impact that? Because the US and Europe are very close, but as you know, Paul, they're still different. And we still have a lot of inspections, regulations that have to be gone through that add a lot of cost. would TTIP address those issues?
That's exactly what we wanted to do. Both sides want high standards for safety and for the environment. We're both leaders in that. And developing technologies means that cars are getting better, and you can see that at the show today. What's going to happen is that there is work, first of all, to look at equivalence. So we're not going to accept sort of any standard. There's detailed work looking to see whether or not the impact of regulations is similar, and then hopefully they can be mutually recognized. More importantly for the future, though, is we want to get common standards agreed. There is an international process for doing that already, and it works to some degree in the automotive sector. It works in aerospace, so it should be able to work better here. But what we need to do is go through that work, and then when in the future the European Union and the US are coming up with new regulations for things like autonomous vehicles, for electric vehicles, then actually there's a similar common standard. And it's really important that we do that as well, because at the moment the Chinese are buying and building more cars than either the EU and the US. In the future, they'll probably be building more than the US and the EU put together. So if we don't work together now to set the standards for the globe, somebody else will do it for us.
That's a great point there.
I think the harmonization of regulation is huge. That's probably one of the biggest sticking points that you have right now. And if you have, again, the free flow where you have this regulation and you know what that regulation is in Europe, or you know what it is in the United States, and it's the same, you don't have to build different things for different countries, and the economies of scale just fall right into place. So, when you look at TTIP, that one is really huge. It's huge for everybody, and to try to get that negotiated and implemented, it's a big thing.
If I can give you just a simple example, for example, the dashboards in Europe and the US, clearly they do the same thing, but the regulations specify that the symbols are actually different. So if you're building a car, you've got to have your supply chain managed to know where the car's going to end up. You've got to have different designs, different stores and so on. So if we can get rid of that sort of problem, it'll be much better for everybody, including consumers, because TTIP could give consumers access to a wider range of vehicles as well.
There's been a lot of concern, not so much on the TTIP side, but on the TPP side when it comes to labor and environmental issues. How do you think that's going to get resolved there?
Well, that just goes to show that, this agreement is very complex. It has a lot of different areas that aren't in traditional free trade agreements, and it's going to make it harder for everybody to go through it and decide, if it's a good agreement. This isn't like the Canadian-U.S. free trade agreement that basically lowers duties. That's kind of easy to understand if that's a good thing or not. This agreement has a lot of different things that could affect suppliers in different ways. It just depends. It's very complex.
Allan, where do we stand right now? TPP, the U.S. government has signed the agreement, right? But
don't believe they've signed it yet.
Right now, it's being considered and seeing what the effects are and whether it meets all of the laws of the land. And once that is determined, then the president has to sign it, and then it has to be sent to Congress for Congress to consider it.
What do you think is going to happen to Congress?
I think that's a toss-up right now. As I talk to legislators on both sides of the aisle, nobody really wants to take a stand. Quite frankly, as I said, it's such a big document and so many things to get your arms around. There aren't a lot of people that really know what's going on with it and what's happening and all of the details. Excuse me. Obviously, we've had some people say they don't support it, but I think that's up in the air. So I would say right now it's 50-50.
Allan, you see it that way? It's a toss-up?
Well, I'm a lawyer. I'm on the trade side. I'm not on the politics side, but the International Trade Commission is going to put out a report on the economic impact of the agreement. I think that's going to be helpful to let people know a lot more about how this can affect things from an economic standpoint. But there's a lot of different timelines and deadlines that this has to work its way through, so it's going to take a while.
Paul, where do we stand with TTIP?
With TTIP, it's behind TPP, and it's also less controversial. What's happening at the moment, though, is that the TPP negotiations are paving the way for TTIP. Once that's out of the way, then the US negotiators will be able to concentrate more on making progress with TTIP.
And what's your assessment? Let's look at the US side first. Up or down? It's a toss-up?
Well, we're not part of it, so we're hoping it passes.
The EU side, because it's controversial in Europe as well.
TTIP is controversial in Europe, but we have high standards in Europe, and we know that the US has them as well. The thing is to get as high standard agreement as possible, which can then be a model for other agreements.
Frank, you were going to add something there?
I think everybody has to understand that when it comes to TPP, we're a long way from getting anything done. I mean, even if hypothetically the U.S. Congress were to agree and pass TTIP and it would be implemented, when you look at the different countries involved, I mean, it's said that, for instance, at Vietnam, it could be 2 years before their legislative bodies even take it up. So I don't think we're anywhere near close to for it to be implemented. I think there's a lot of study that have to be done. I think TTIP is the same way. But I would say that, if you look at the overall body of work for TTIP, this regulation harmonization is huge. And that is a huge money saver. So I think that, quite frankly, would have a bit of an easier way to go than what we're dealing with now.
And the good thing about TTIP is it's only two entities, it's the US and the EU. It makes it a little easier to get things done. It makes it a little easier to understand the consequences and if things are good or bad. And TPP, as I said, it's got 12 countries.
Yeah.
It's much more complex, and as Frank said, we have different legislative rules in each country to how they may approve it and things like that.
These things are hugely complicated, but if you just bring it down to a simple level, you have things like seatbelt anchors. The EU has been looking at these, and it turns out that the design standards are different, the testing processes are different, but actually only marginally in both cases, and yet we have to completely redesign them for selling in either side, and yet nobody, as far as we know, has ever been killed by a seatbelt anchor failing. They just work.
But Paul, ever since I got into this business, many, many moons ago, everyone's been talking about global harmonization of regulations. But the attitude is, yes, we should all harmonize, everybody should adopt my standard.
Yes.
How do you get beyond that?
Well, the TTIP is a really good opportunity for doing that. There is some harmonization already, but you're right, people generally take the attitude that others should adopt their standards. We're encouraging the regulators to speak to each other, to share more information, and then to look for the future. I think what will happen is there will be a small package of recognition of equivalence where that can be found, and that's a complicated technical process. But then as technology changes, as we get more into autonomous vehicles and so on, then there's bigger opportunities for harmonization.
There are. Let's talk pickup trucks just for the moment on the TPP side.
Yep.
One of the things that makes the U.S. market so profitable is the full-size pickup trucks,
Yep.
which are protected by a 25% import tax.
Right.
With TPP, presumably that would go away. Doesn't this put the biggest generating source of profits for the Detroit 3 at risk?
Well, I don't want to take a position on it per se, right at it, but I think one of the factors you have to look at as part of the TPP prolongs, that duty on trucks coming into on pickup.
So it doesn't go away right away.
It doesn't go away. Nothing goes away right away. That's the whole thing. Nothing goes away right away.
But it would be phased out in time.
Everything is a phase in, and I think you'll agree that the pickup truck part or the light truck part is a longer phase in than anything else, right?
Allan, your thoughts on that specifically?
Well, I agree, and I mean, don't forget that in the case of the U.S., most of our duty rates are generally pretty low anyway, or free.
But not pickups.
Not the
pickups.
Pickups are the exception, but most automotive components in vehicles can be 2.5% or zero, so we have fairly low duty rates. One of the things I think that TPP can do is get us those kind of duty rates on the other members so that we can produce goods and export them to Japan, and those other countries. I think that's a good plus.
Yeah, but I just want to go back and make sure that we understand that 25% coming in does not go away. Okay, it's like I think of 20 years it takes before it goes away. So I think while it's not perfect, it's something.
There's a protection there.
There is a protection there, so it doesn't go away. But he's right. I think the real key is if it's comes into effect and approved is dropping some of the duties that we face when we try to export goods all to other countries, and you face like a 35% tariff going in, and there's a 2.5% tariff coming back. That's not fair. You have to fix that.
You do. And as you said, even though there's a lot of controversy and there's going to be a long time getting this all settled, there's some big payoffs if it really does go through. Look, with that, we're going to have to wrap this up. Fascinating discussion. There's a lot more to go into. We don't have time for that on this show. We're going to have to get back to it again sometime. But I want to thank all three of you. Frank Ervin from Magna, Allan Stevenson from Delphi, and Paul Griffiths from the United Kingdom's Department for Business. Thank all three of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't go away, folks. We got 2 more panels yet to come, and they're going to be just as interesting as this one, I'm sure. We'll be back after this.
Stand out by design.
Joining me right now is Jeff Cly. He is the president of Continental North America. Great to have you back in the studio.
Great to be with you, John.
Look, I know one of the hot topics with you is we need to attract a new generation into this automotive industry. We know it's a great industry, but you've been talking about how we need to change the image. What do you mean by that?
Well, the image of the industry is not necessarily that we're so high tech, that we have so many interesting technologies, and certainly at Continental, when I think of the industry, we are working on some of the most exciting technologies in the world, with everything from emission technologies to the automated driving technologies to the comfort and connected vehicle technologies. We are on the cutting edge of some of the best and brightest technologies out there, and people don't know it.
There's a lot of effort, especially in the United States, but around the world too, to encourage more people to go into STEM education, science, technology, engineering, math. But it sounds to me like you're not able to get enough of those graduates.
We can't. You know, we go to campuses all the time, and we try and recruit. And number one, the industry, automotive industry, is not necessarily the industry of choice for a lot of these folks. Number two, they don't know that the industry in the way we do, so they want to go to industries that are looking at some of the advanced technologies. If they knew that we were working on automated technologies, automated driving, the comfort and connected car technologies, dynamic e-horizon, some of the advanced mapping technologies, they would be excited to come into the industry, but they don't know it.
You obviously are getting some of these people to come.
We are.
What are the things that work? What turns this younger generation onto the automotive industry?
Well, part of it is just the company itself. And we are really trying to change the image of the company. We are tapping into some of the Silicon Valley thinking. We've got an office now in Silicon Valley. We just acquired a software company, 1,900 software engineers with a company called Electrobit, to try and change a little bit the image of the company, that we are a software company as well. We've got 25,000 engineers, and more than half of those are software engineers. So we are a software company. And so as we go to campus, we talk about the software needs, the software technologies, the products and services that we're trying to create. So we're changing a little bit the image of our company, but also the industry at the same time. But I think as an industry, we have to collaborate even more on this. We got to.
How does the industry do? I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
How do you go about doing that?
I think number one is, as we're out talking in events like this and other events, we have to talk about this. We got to talk about the cool stuff that the automotive industry is working on, not just in production, but even more some of the advanced stuff. We're competing with the Apples. We're competing with some of the technology leaders that the kids want to go work at. And they don't know the stuff we're working at. So we have to work together. We got to go on campus. We got to talk about these technologies. And that's all you can do, you know. But also, it's also changing the image of the company. Our company, you know, I don't have a tie on. We are really trying to change we have much more telecommuting. We're trying to be much more flexible with our employees. We're trying to let them work from home more. We're trying different things to attract and retain some of the best and brightest.
Continental, of course, big global corporation. Is this more of a U.S. problem that you're talking about, or do you see this happening around the world?
It's around the world. If you think of China itself, it's really difficult. You know, people tend to move more often, and the automotive industry is still relatively new in China. When you think of the industries, you know, it's expanding. And people move a lot more often. So attracting is one thing, but in China, to retain them is even more of a challenge. When you go to Europe, people know the auto industry. It's seen as an industry that is cutting edge, and they know the suppliers, they know the OEMs. We don't have as much of a challenge in Europe. It's still a challenge. The U.S. is kind of somewhere in the middle, right? We can attract some people, but not always the best and the brightest. But once we get them, generally the retention is pretty good, because they get it, they see it, they feel it, they're working on some of this stuff. And so the retention is not as big of a problem. But we got to get some of the best and brightest from California, from Silicon Valley. We got to tap into the mindset and also the skill set and bring them into our company and our industry.
Look, I could not agree more. I'm totally with you. I'm hoping that having this conversation today helps move this forward, because the industry has got to do it, not just Continental.
I hope so, and certainly we want to team with any company, any OEM, any supplier, and do more. You know, we're trying to do it at events like auto shows, events like SAE World Congress. We teamed with Honda last year. We're trying to do more to promote it, and anybody who wants to work with us, we're ready to go.
Jeff Cly, President of Continental North America, thanks for sharing your thoughts on this topic.
Thanks, John. Good to be with you.
Welcome back to the Autoline Supplier Symposium. This is our second panel coming to you from the Detroit Auto Show here in the Ford display. Now we're going to start talking about new technology in cars, specifically connected vehicle technology, and where that's going to take this industry, and it is going to change it. Joining me for this panel discussion are Gary Steelman, the Director of Advanced Engine and New Concepts for Magneti Marelli. Elaina Farnsworth is the CEO of Mobile Comply, and Scott McCormick is the president of the CVTA, and let's make sure I got this right, the Connected Vehicle Transportation Association?
Trade Association.
Trade Association, I was close. So Scott, just give a quick overview of what the Trade Association is all about and where you hope to take this industry.
We were created 10 years ago at the request of the automakers to provide a venue for all the industries that are going to be participating in the build out of vehicle communications. Automakers typically only deal with the tiers like the Magneti Marellis, but we needed infrastructure, networking, communication, all of the different industries that are currently involved. There's 17 different industry groups that are now represented by CVTA in advancing the development of this space.
And let's talk connected vehicles. Where are we at this snapshot in time? And let's take us to the end of the decade. What do you see?
Well, right now we have a lot of familiarity with how to deal with cellular communication inside the vehicle. Some of the automakers are enabling Wi-Fi hotspots. About 80% of the vehicles that are on the road have a satellite communication chip in it, and there's a number of different things we're looking there. And the U.S. federal government is looking to mandate the requirement for a very special communication technology called dedicated short-range communications to provide safety messages from other vehicles to your vehicle, not necessarily to you, but to your vehicle, about road weather and traffic conditions. That we expect to see. For example, Mary Barra announced that it's going to be in the 2017 Cadillac CTS. Very important deployment, because we also know that with that comes the ability to not just bring in information and entertainment to your car, but to enable us along a path that gets us closer to automation, so that if the car is aware of road weather and traffic conditions, its safety can be preventative rather than reactive.
Elaina, we'll get into the discussion first, but Mobile Comply, not exactly a household name for those traditionalists of us in the industry who, for example, know Magneti Marelli. Give us a quick snapshot. What is Mobile Comply?
Sure. Mobile Comply focuses on the certification and training for people that are already in the connected vehicle industry or that are going into it in the future. There's such a convergence of technologies that are going on right now between auto and communication protocols, as well as software and security. So we really bring all of those concepts together to make sure that the emerging workforce is ready.
Gotcha. And Gary, I know Magneti Marelli for all the electrical and electronic parts and components on a car. Tell us what it's doing as we get into connected vehicles.
Well, we're supporting a lot with the telematics, especially the e-call and GLONASS details in Europe. And then in the US, we're working a lot on the V2V, V2X, which is bringing in connectivity and puts a major focus on safety.
Because with connected vehicles, presumably we can prevent cars from crashing into each other, right?
Absolutely. And a lot of people sort of think this is really a new technology, but I saw the first demonstrations of this 10 years ago, and so all of the OEMs have been working on it, and the Tier 1s have been working on it for a long time. And it's ready, and it's going to work.
why is it taking so long? Because I, like you, saw some of this. I saw a demonstration more than 10 years ago, and at the time that I got the demonstration, they said, yeah, about 2010, 2012, it's all going to be ready for production. Here it's 2016, and it's not in production yet.
Yeah, a couple things happened. One is they wanted to step back and make sure that the standards were in place for both the broadcast technology and the message sets. So that's been done. The other thing, security has come along, and so security has been wrapped into this technology with certificates and public key encryption. So
cybersecurity is what you're getting at, right?
Correct. Yeah. So a lot of the fears about not having security in the system, we hit this at a good time to be able to take some time out and build that in.
Gotcha. And Elaina, where do we stand? I mean, you're talking about getting the workforce and people ready for this sort of thing. I'll bet we're not ready.
We're getting there. We are not ready. So we have already seen a deficit in the workforce that's prepared. So for instance, if you have worked for 25 years at a telecommunication provider, the likelihood that you've ever really worked in vehicle may be limited. Or if you've also worked in an OEM or supplier in the automobile industry, the likelihood that you worked also in the telecommunications arena or the software, again, is very limited. So the Center of Automotive Research produced a study last year in 2015 that showed that the autos are finding that there is an overwhelming majority that's not finding exactly the right mix. So the good news is we do have the foundation in the industry to be able to promote the next level of professional, but we just have to find the right career paths to get them there.
The auto industry overall has a problem attracting young talent. Seems everybody wants to go work for Google or Apple. But this, I would think, would be the perfect technology to get young people excited at getting into the automotive industry. I mean, it's very advanced. It's all, connectivity. Are you finding that to be the case?
We're really working hard to be able to show the reality of the automobile for the future. There are millions of lines of code. This is a very complex machine, but it also has the capability to hold some of the keys to the future, to the connectivity component between your mobile devices and just pieces that the general public and the high school students as well as the universities may not know what's out there. But if they really take a look at what the future holds and where this technology is really going, it opens an entirely different paradigm to being able to be engaged in a software capacity or also into a user interface capacity, but also these very sophisticated technologies. It's not your dad's automobile anymore.
And Scott, you mentioned that General Motors is on the verge of coming out with a connected car, which is terrific. Somebody's got to take a first step. How soon do you think it will be before all cars are connected? All new cars?
Well, if the mandate occurs before the end of the Obama administration, which we expect it will, the Department of Transportation will give the automakers 2 to 3 years to start deploying that technology into all of their cars. Given that we only replace 6.7% of our cars every year, it would take 15 years to get the entire fleet reproduced. So what we're really looking at is that's not the only solution we have. You can do this in an aftermarket device, and if you have a car, and a typical person in the United States right now keeps their car for about 11 and a half years. So the average car is about 5 3/4 years old. So if you have a car that's 3 or 4 or 5 years old and you're going to keep it for another 5, 6 years, you may now want to look at an aftermarket device that brings in that information on road weather and traffic conditions so that not only are you having a safer, more productive drive, but it should increase the resale value of the car over cars that don't have that technology. And then you always have the fact that as our phones get smarter, look where our phones were 5 years ago, where they're going to be 5 years from now, they may have functionality that very much more pairs with the car and brings other functionality, other safety, other aspects to your travel that makes it more efficient and productive for you.
That's an exciting prospect because, my phone today already has a camera in it. I could mount it on the dashboard. It's got an accelerometer, hence it knows how I'm accelerating or braking. I would imagine that if it was connected to other cars around, it might even be able to warn me that somebody's about to run a red light. Am I painting the right kind of future here?
Well, no, that's exactly what we really want to move to. If, for example, you're driving right in front of me and your car detects that you're on black ice, It's real important that you tell me immediately, and that's why DSRC is important. It has the fastest transmission time to get to any other device. So it's real important that you tell me immediately that there's ice at that exact geolocation. But if Elaina is a quarter mile behind us, she doesn't need to know that immediately. So if we could simultaneously broadcast not just DSRC to DSRC, but DSRC to 3 or 4G into the environment, what that allows is everyone's smartphone could be notified that, hey, up ahead there's a problem, and you can be preventative in your safety rather than just reactive. And so we'd like to see both forms of that technology used to transmit that information.
Gary, this, as Elaina pointed out, requires millions of lines of code, tens of millions of lines of code. Even though you mentioned cybersecurity may have slowed down some of the development, I gotta believe worrying about bugs in the software is a bigger concern.
It is a concern. It's always a concern when you have a connection to the vehicle because it's another open port to the vehicle. But at least with the V2X side of it, a lot of the basic security has been built in. So we think that's going to help a lot. And in the future, there's a lot of effort working on cybersecurity, and that'll have to be integrated in particular into the CAN bus that's in the car, because currently that's not near as well protected. And that's one of the things that we're working on, is to make sure that we can have safety within the bus in the vehicle in addition to just the V2V.
And how do you make sure that the software works 100% in any kind of a condition? That's got to be a tough thing to test.
One of the best ways is to encourage the hackers that are out today, the white hat hackers, and they're willing to come in and work and hack on the system. So you develop a hackathon that comes in and looks at the system and finds the vulnerabilities, and then you patch them. And it's always true that nothing is impenetrable given enough time and resources. But we can step that up a lot and make it to where I think people will be comfortable.
And Elaina, you mentioned we're not quite there yet. What's it going to take to make sure that we've got the workforce ready to do all this?
It's going to take education and awareness. So a big push that we would like to see in the future is the awareness from the high school age or even back into the middle school about what this evolving industry really looks like and how they can become involved. And secondly, it's empowering the workforce that's working today to go to that next level. So if they are interested in seeing this connectivity become a reality within the company, to have these companies incentivize them to get educated to the next level so that they're aware of where their careers can go in the future, because this is where the vehicles of tomorrow are going to be.
Do you have any good examples? Who's doing that? Who's taking this message to high schools?
There are some folks specifically here in Michigan that are really getting down to that level to go in and say, we want to talk to you not just about building a car. We want to talk to you about the technologies that are involved. There's a foundation, a wonderful foundation that's local to Michigan that's called Square One. They're doing things inside of the high schools where they're actually building many cars that are platooning one another from kits that are going into circulation. So there's a lot of wonderful things going on locally as well as nationally to get that awareness to those folks that are going to be our future workforce.
I'm glad you brought up Square One because they're one of my favorite examples too.
Yes.
And as you know, they're not just going to high school, they're going down into elementary school too. That's where you get kids hooked on this sort of thing.
Yes.
Okay, Scott, one other thing that I know that you've talked about before is when we get into connected cars, there could be a huge payoff to the automotive industry, because clearly if we're preventing cars from getting into accidents and we're mitigating traffic flow or mitigating traffic congestion, I should say, there's a payoff in fuel economy, a payoff in emissions. Explain a little bit your thoughts on that regard. Maybe getting carbon credits for adding this technology to cars.
Actually, yes, there's legislation, the current energy bill that's sitting in Congress right now. We actually, CVTA, input language to it about 3 years ago, and over the course of years advanced it. And that language said, hey, if you put something in your car that enhances your safety, such as the vehicle message sets that are communicating road weather and traffic data, you ought to get some sort of credit for either CAFE or for emissions. And that has actually become the centerpiece of the energy bill now. That energy bill now says that the automakers will have a choice that you can get these credits if you put in 3 advanced technologies, and they're going to create a committee to decide what those are, or if you put in the vehicle message through DSRC. When you look at how the world actually operates with traffic, when cars that are entirely piloted by individuals, you're now relying upon your attentiveness, the level of distraction that you may have from children, from pets, from weather, from other things. If we can provide more of that intelligence to you as a driver and to you and to the car itself, it can now do things like keep you in your lane. And people may not think that's very important, but studies have shown that 100% of the time that anyone drives, they will violate their lane integrity. And so now the question is that if we automate a little bit too fast, we actually are seeing more distraction problems because people are, okay, the car's going to stay in its lane or it's not going to run in the car in front of me. So now they're less attentive than they were before. So we've got to map this and say, how do we make sure that we keep you attentive to the level you need, that we move into the area that says I'm giving you useful information, because you don't care if there's ice over there coming out the other way, you only care if it's on your drive. And so when you're broadcasting this information, to your point, I've got to have that GPS location and direction. I have to know that travel vector, where I'm going, how fast I'm going, and in what direction, so that I can correlate that against people that are with me, or in opposition to me, or cross traffic for me.
Look, I think this is going to be really exciting, and especially when you get into talking about how this can improve the fuel efficiency of the fleet, I think the automotive industry is going to want to adopt this ASAP. But with that, we're going to have to wrap up this discussion. I want to thank all 3 of you. Gary Steelman from Magneti Marelli, Elaina Farnsworth from Mobile Comply, and Scott McCormick from the CVTA. Thanks for participating in this panel discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Powerful by design.
Joining me right now is Brad Lefebvre. He's the Vice President of Sales and Business Development for Transmission Systems at BorgWarner. Great to have you here in the studio.
Thanks for having me, John.
Boy, when it comes down to improving fuel efficiency, reducing emissions, there's so much focus on transmissions these days. Tell us what some of the R&D efforts going on at BorgWarner. What are you really keying in on when it comes to developing a new generation of transmissions?
Well, you're absolutely right, John. The focus right now really is on fuel economy and emissions and drivability in the next generation of transmissions. And at BorgWarner, we have a number of technologies that we're bringing to market. Primarily in the clutching arena and also in the controls area. We see a lot of technology aimed at getting efficiency in transmissions in both of those areas. We have electrohydraulic solenoids that are bringing incremental improvements in fuel economy for hydraulic losses. So we're trying to bring down the hydraulic losses that you see inside a transmission. And in the clutching arena, you actually see the next generation of transmissions needing to shift at very high shift speeds, with very efficient and low drag loss characteristics. So we're having to bring state-of-the-art technology in our friction and clutching technologies to address the fuel economy needs for this next generation.
I find that fascinating, that still here's 100 years of clutches in the history of the industry, and you're still figuring out how to make clutches even better.
We really are. And what we're finding is that not just in the area of material development, but also in the actuation of clutches, we're seeing more need for active clutching. So when you get into areas where you're either hybridizing, implementing stop-start technology, or even just trying to get additional fuel economy out of a traditional stepped automatic transmission, having the ability to now add active clutch technology into the transmission is providing even more fuel economy and functionality improvement.
Go a little bit deeper on that, because I find it fascinating that clutches play a role in stop-start technology.
Well, one of the products that BorgWarner's been developing is a clutch that could allow you to keep the starter permanently engaged for the stop-start feature. And what that allows you to do is improve what they call change of mind event, allow the driver a little more change of mind flexibility during some of the stop-start behaviors that you see in the operation of the transmission. And the second thing it allows you to do is to increase your off time of the engine in what we call sailing. So we can actually see more fuel economy improvements come about in the next generation of stop-start technology.
The early stop-start technologies were kind of rough. You got the efficiency, but every time the engine would restart, it could send a shudder through the car. I guess this is what you're bringing in to eliminate that.
Absolutely. So the next generation of stop-start really has to have a whole new level of refinement, something that the end consumer won't object to in any way, shape, or form, and won't mind or maybe even know when the engine is restarting or re-engaging with the transmission. So our technology is trying to make that seamless in a way that it's not objectionable to the end driver.
BorgWarner recently acquired Remy. Some people remember it as Delco Remy, but explain why that's important for what you're doing.
Remy was a very important acquisition for BorgWarner on a number of fronts. First of all, it brought into BorgWarner the ability to have more electrical motor capability into our portfolio. And that allows us to do a couple of things. First of all, it allows us to really strengthen our hybridization portfolio, bring products to market in combination with our heavy mechanical, electromechanical type technology. The second thing it allows us to do is take advantage of some of the stop-start technology and the starter, alternator, and integrated starter generator technology that Remy had been developing, and now we can bring that into the portfolio for BorgWarner.
Well, Brad, thanks so much for talking about this. Very interesting to hear about all the R&D and high tech going into clutches and transmissions. It's fascinating to me.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the opportunity.
Welcome back to the Autoline Supplier Symposium, coming to you from the Detroit Auto Show here in the brilliant Ford display. Now we're going to really get into talking about product technology, into the hardware itself. This is a segment sponsored by, or really I should say organized by the Center for Automotive Research. Let me introduce you to the panel. Joining us today are Nigel Francis, the Vice President of Advanced Engineering and Electronic Systems for American Axle and Manufacturing. Jeff Owens is the CTO and Executive Vice President with Delphi, and Jay Barron is the President and CEO of the Center for Automotive Research. Thank you all for being here today. Jay, let's jump right into this. Man, if I'm a car company, I love being in the business, but man, do I face a lot of regulation. Let me just go through some of it that's here. You know, I've got CAFE requirements. I got zero emission vehicle. I got safety. I got now soon going to be connectivity ones. How do you sort this all out?
Oh, it's really tough because these are consumer products, and at the same time we have to meet regulations, and so we've got to make things that people want to buy. Connectivity, the younger generation likes connectivity. You can do a lot of concierge activities in the car, so certain things the consumer will be happy with. But other technologies, especially with low gas prices, fuel economy, emissions reductions, and some of the technologies in the cars, a little bit more challenging. And we saw some wonderful technology rolled out here this week at the auto show. You got a 200-mile plus bolt that has been rolled out, a plug-in hybrid minivan. So you're starting to see technology coming out, and it remains to be seen if these are going to really be hits in the marketplace.
And it's got to be enormously complicated for these automakers to try to figure out how to meet all this and still satisfy the customer at the same time.
Well, that is the deal. That really is the primary deal. And of course, as our industry folks here well know, the midterm review is coming up here in 2016. And the industry will be looking at all of the factors. Are people buying the vehicles? What is the price of gasoline? The technology's cost coming down as projected? There's a lot of variables at stake here, and without question, some companies are much better positioned than others, and so that's the challenging side. On the opportunity side, I've never seen the auto companies' doors as wide open as they are now for suppliers that have wonderful technology, and that kind of led us to the other two guests we have here to talk about some of that wonderful technology, because we're looking for all kinds of ways to cost effectively reduce emissions, reduce gas consumption, increase the wow factor of connectivity and active safety, and so all these things going on. So it's a very exciting time. It's nice to see the technology. There's a lot of excitement in the supply base. So, just one statistic. You look at last year's deaths in the auto industry in the United States were a little over 32,000 people in the United States due to crash. And of course, the Department of Transportation's goal is 0 fatalities due to crash, which is commendable, but is it really realistic? Well, Volvo is talking about having 0 fatalities on their car, I believe the XC90, by 2020. That's their goal. So it's starting to look like with all this connectivity in these smart vehicles, 0 fatalities may very well be within reach. It's not that big a stretch. You got all kinds of sensor technology, cars that if they do crash, have incredible strength in the body structures. You're seeing a big transition from passive safety to active safety, where the car is going to start taking control if you're not doing it right. So you're just starting to see these technologies roll out one at a time, and it really is phenomenal to see that here at the Auto Show.
Well, as you said, we got 2 other guests here. Let's start talking about some of this hardware. And Nigel, at American Axle, you guys are doing some pretty interesting stuff with what you call eDrive. Tell the audience what that's about.
Yeah, sure, John. So really, what I'd absolutely agree with what Jay is saying. There's opportunity everywhere in the supply base. So if you're in the automotive industry today, in that supply base, it's a technological dream. It's a dream world, Everybody's looking for technological enhancements, and yes, you're right that the industry's focused on safety, the industry's focused on fuel efficiency, and the industry's focused on tailpipe emissions. Okay, so for us, what does that mean for us? Well,
yeah, how does an axle manufacturer play a role in that?
Let me just roll that back a bit and try and answer that question, I mean, surprisingly, we actually exist across that spectrum going forward, because we have to be a technology leader as a company to be relevant both today and into the future. So let's think about axles. Well, axles could be more efficient. They could be lighter weight, less weight, less energy to move it. So there's your fuel, the beginnings of your fuel efficiency. Then what you can do is you can say, okay, well, let's have some electrification on there. So you go from mechanical to a mixture of mechanical and electrical drive system. So you've got some more efficiency there. Now let's start thinking about safety. Well, so on safety, what I would say is that there's 2 aspects of it for me. One is being able to control the yaw of the vehicle, normally through some sort of torque vectoring, but basically you're executing yaw control through the driveline. That enhances the safety of the vehicle. And then let's look at adding now what I call intelligence into the driveline. So, in the future, we talk about vehicle-to-vehicle and vehicle-to-infrastructure communications. There are going to be signals, messages, available on the vehicle that theoretically any supplier can use, albeit at the OEM's whim, for sure, it's their vehicle. But you might imagine a system that can communicate vehicle-to-vehicle and from the infrastructure. And indeed, we at American Axle, we have a product which actually is in mechanical driveline. We call it EcoTrack. It's in series production on the Jeep Cherokee today, and that's a disconnecting all-wheel drive system that senses 20-something vehicle and environment parameters. So, for example, if the temperature's below a particular point and the windscreen wipers are on, it pre-engages the clutch for the all-wheel drive system. No driver intervention. That's today. Imagine a future where a vehicle ahead of you on the road, for example, passes a message that says, hey, I've just engaged my all-wheel drive system. And it passes that message around it, and other vehicles have their all-wheel drive system automatically engaged, and many other features. So it's very interesting time for all of us in the automotive industry, particularly in the supply base. And I would say that it's super sexy place for young people to come and work and engage in a technological environment.
Yeah, that's a theme that we've been hammering throughout the Supplier Symposium. Jeff, let's get you into the conversation. So much technology coming, there's this regulation, who would have thought we'd have intelligent axles of all things? That shows how much the industry's coming.
Right.
But in many cases, the legislators, the regulators, even the courts can't keep up with this pace of change. How do we deal with that, or can we?
Yeah, that's a great question, and Secretary of Transportation Fox is here today, actually this afternoon, talking about just that for automated vehicles, and trying to understand from a government perspective how they can facilitate the prominent growth of active safety of automated vehicles, help make the roadways safer, reduce the fatality rate, reduce the accident rate, not get in the way of the automobile manufacturers as opposed to restricting them. And it's really, I think, the first time I've heard from a government body kind of taking that approach, right? It's how do we not get in the way, how do we facilitate, as opposed to, how do we provide the framework that you can operate in? So really glad they're here, really glad to hear what they're saying, really glad to hear that they're open for that kind of comment. I don't have any doubt that Secretary of Transportation Fox and the NHTSA Administrator Rosekind wants to facilitate this technology into the car, into the automotive space, to reduce that accident load, to reduce the fatality load, and they know the regulatory process in and of itself is very long, 5 to 8 years. So they're looking for ways to get out of the way while the automobile industry is pushing forward with that. Automatic emergency braking, for example, active safety technology that's being pulled by consumers. They'll make it part of 5-star, for example, highlight to consumer, if you want a 5-star, if you want the safest car that you can buy on the road, it will contain active safety equipment. And let them make the choice if they want that or not.
So what would you like to see? And let me preface that by saying Delphi is at the forefront of autonomous technology. You drove across the country, you were down at CES with your autonomous cars, and yet we don't see any federal regulations. We're starting to see the states jump in. California, where much of this autonomous technology is being developed, said, no, you got to have a driver behind the steering wheel. I got to believe, as a supplier that's at the forefront of this technology, you'd prefer to see federal regulations rather than the 50 states legislate their own.
Yeah, that's a great point. We did the cross-country drive early last year. We went 3,400 miles. We went through 15 states and a bunch of municipalities. They all have a different view on what we had to do as we drove through that state. They all have a different view on what lane markings are. Dot bots, a solid white line, a dashed white line, how thick the lines are, how often they have to be refreshed. And we're going to have to be dependent on all that if we're going to have a US-based system, for example. So yeah, if you could get to a level of standardization, that would be liberating to the supply base, it'd be liberating to the OEs. But absent that, I think you're going to see a lot of different approaches.
Jay, Center for Automotive Research does a lot of research in these regards. You consult with a lot of automakers, suppliers, government bodies. What kind of advice are you giving them? I got to believe you'd rather see national legislation rather than 50 different sets.
Oh yeah, harmonization of the rules is critical, which was one of the big impetuses behind the regulations we have now on fuel economy and emissions. We don't want a patchwork of regulations to work with. We'd even like more than that. We would like harmonization across countries if we could get it. It would reduce costs, it would improve the development cycle and so on. But we're having trouble enough keeping it together in our own country, never mind worrying about North America or Europe and Asia. But that clearly would be a goal. We were doing some interviews of companies and lawyers who look at some of this. And the issue was raised, if you develop a new technology that saves 10 lives, but once in a while causes a life, you can't deploy that technology. Because we're a litigious society. You've got to have an absolute foolproof technology before you can start deploying it and mandating it. So, part of this is rolling out. I was surprised even this week looking at some of the technologies in safety that have gone from passive to active. Because it's one thing to beep a light to say that you are getting too close to the car in front of you or you're starting to go off the road or something. But it's another thing for the car to take control because it doesn't think you're doing a good job. That's a big step. And you're starting to see it play out in front of us now. So it really is interesting to see that. And we don't want to have standards that constrain innovation, but at the same time, you've got to have standards to be able to have different companies, different auto companies, one car to talk to another car, and so on. So it really is a big gray area right now that's kind of being worked out.
Nigel, this must affect even American Axle too.
Yeah, so I think it's very interesting for us. I think the popular conception perhaps of an axle is it's an axle. Well, I think that's a very old-fashioned view. The world has changed, What we do in driveline is a safety critical aspect of an automobile, and we're critically aware of that as a company. Absolutely critically aware of that as a company, both now and going forward into the future, because as we add electrification into our driveline and intelligence into our driveline, more and more we need to make a very solid and seamless handshake with the OE in relation to safety aspects. So you go back sort of 20, 30 years ago, a driveline's a driveline, maybe. I don't wish to disrespect or belittle it, but we really are moving into an area, a period in time where the driveline becomes a very intimate part of the safety system of the vehicle. And let's not forget that, because the focus for sure for the last decade has been on electronics and sensors and things like AEB, and I believe that will continue. But now the rest of the car's beginning to catch up with the availability of that intelligence and the progression of that intelligence in time. Yeah.
Jeff, let's go back to the Transportation Secretary quickly here. I know you said that he's, first time you heard anybody say, hey, we want to work with you, not just against you. I've got to believe they're hyper aware of the potential safety benefits of this technology, and that's one of the things that's driving them to have a more open approach to it.
Yeah, no, the statistics are compelling, right? We've seen it in Europe, and when they went to 5-star, there's enough active safety systems on the road now with enough statistics. Jay said it earlier, 33,000 fatalities last year in the United States, and edging up just a little bit per driven mile. So we got to take the next big step. The OEs have done a great job of protecting the occupant. They've done a great job with crush zones and accident protection. And now you've got to avoid or mitigate the accident. And the data is just overwhelming in terms of the impact it can have. I mean, it's great business for us. We think it's the fast growth space in the industry, but it will make us such a huge difference from society perspective that all the OEs now will stand up with the NHTSA administrator and say, yes, automatic emergency braking will be standard. I will make that standard equipment on my vehicles.
Yeah, the payoff is huge. If you could eliminate 32,000 fatalities a year, imagine the impact on the healthcare system in America if you could free up 2 million hospital beds a year, because we send 2 million people to the hospital because of traffic accidents. Yep. I can't wait to see this start to come in, and we're on the verge of having it happen. With that, we're going to have to wrap this panel up. I want to thank all three of you. Nigel Francis with American Axle, Jeff Owens with Delphi, and Jay Barron with the Center for Automotive Research. Thanks to all three of you for coming here today. And I want to thank all of you for having tuned in. I hope you've enjoyed these 2 days of panel discussions that we've had, hitting on some of the most important topics affecting the automotive industry, specifically from a supplier standpoint. With that, we wrap it up. I want to thank all of you for having tuned in. I want to thank the Ford Motor Company for having provided us with such a terrific location at the 2016 North American International Auto Show.
So Jeff, what sensors do you have on the XC90?
We've got
the Autoline Supplier Symposium is brought to you by our signature sponsor, Ford, Go Further, and also by Pure Michigan, dedicated to maintaining Michigan's position as the epicenter of the global automotive industry, Continental, the future in motion, and by Borg Warner, feel good about driving.